Welcome to PJTV's Trifecta, the only show on TV solving all the world's problems in 6 minutes or less. I am Steve Green, your host for today's segment. Last week, the New York Daily News reported on what sounds to me like a very worthwhile program for needy kids. Parents receiving welfare benefits in New York are getting $200 for each of their kids put on their welfare debit cards. No strings attached, but the money is supposed to be for back-to-school supplies and clothes, that sort of thing. Almost 500,000 kids will be getting money in New York City and nearly 900,000 across the state. What could be wrong with that? Well, here to answer that question is PJTV's own Bill Whittle, live from our Los Angeles studios. Bill, you have to read way below the fold in this story to get to the juicy stuff. As it turns out, this welfare money isn't coming from payroll taxes or even New York's general fund. Most of it is coming from the stimulus, and about 20% is coming from billionaire political activist George Soros. Is there a line here that's getting blurred?
Well, first of all, I'd like to welcome George Soros to the show, and it's always good to see the face of real compassion. Look, this goes really to the heart of the issue, doesn't it, Steve? I mean, as a conservative, how dare they give away money to these poor people? Of course it's a great idea. Money spent on education is an investment in America's future. If you're getting $200 for school supplies and for clothes and stuff for kids who need it to go to school, then by God, that is about as well spent money as you can possibly have as far as the federal government's concerned. The problem comes with whether or not an ideology is attached to this, and it's interesting that a guy like George Soros, who has funds in so many different areas, is willing to step up and take credit for this. I wouldn't mind that so much if his name was attached to all the other things that he's behind and which don't serve quite so lofty a purpose.
Move on indeed. Now joining us from Zionsville, Pennsylvania is Washington Examiner columnist Scott Ott. Scott, the story quotes a young lady named Alicia Rumpf, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, saying, and this is a quote, "It's free money. Thank God for Obama." Instead, shouldn't she be thanking her unborn grandkids for being kind enough to lend her the money?
Yeah.
And apparently she doesn't know about Mr. Soros' involvement. Otherwise, she'd be thanking the Lord for him as well. This is, I think we're really blurring the line here. The so-called public-private partnerships sound great in concept, but I'd rather see a whole lot more private money involved in this if this is what we want to do. I'd also like to see how the private sector would manage such a program. The problem is we're getting 20% of George Soros' money involved, but it's the government that's running the program. And as a result, already the calls have been coming in to welfare offices from Walmarts in the area saying, hey, by the way, is a video game technically a school supply? Is a television set a school supply? So they're getting the calls already from people who are taking the $200 that was intended to buy, nice little plaid shirts and polyester pants like we all wore to school, and instead it's going to TVs and video games in some cases.
Well, do you think there's a danger here that all this free stimulus cash could be used to undo a dozen years of welfare reform then?
I think a dozen years of welfare reform is already undone. I mean, I'm not sure. I'm glad, welfare reform accomplished some things and got some folks back in the workforce. But just the general idea that there's something for nothing is damaging to the individuals who receive it, because it trains up a whole generation of people to believe that it's not the dignity of work that produces fruit, but it just drops from the heavens, from the hands of President Obama. And that denigrates the human spirit.
All right, Bill, I'd like to get back to you for a second on a point you kind of glanced over, but I'd like to get into. Is it possible to even just examine a program like this without risking being made into looking like a Scrooge?
Listen, as I said at the beginning, I'm all in favor of this money going to kids for help for school supplies. When Scott says that this money is going to TV sets, it makes me really angry. And I'm not kidding. It makes me really, really angry. One of the reasons that these kids are in trouble is because a parent would make a decision like that. You and I know, you guys are parents. You would never make that decision to sacrifice kids' school supplies for a big screen TV, but that's obviously going on. I'd be very interested to follow how much of that money goes to school supplies. I'd be interested in finding that out, because the people that do spend it on school supplies should be rewarded with more school supplies in the future. They've shown they're trustworthy stewards of the money. People who take that money and spend it on TV screens should be cut off. They should be cut off. Okay? It's ridiculous.
Okay.
It goes to exactly what you were talking about, is this sense of dependency. Thank God for Obama, it's free money. It's not Obama's money, and it's not free money. It's your kids' money, and it's your grandkids' money. That's who's buying these big screen TVs for you, if that's what it's being spent on.
All right, let's go to our 30-second rants. We'll turn the first one over to Mr. Scott Ott, starting now.
Well, and I think this points up the whole problem of elected officials being able to hand out money that actually, as Bill says, belongs to you and I. And it gives them this patina of virtuousness that somehow they're the ones who have provided this for you. And the reality is they are just purchasing what they consider to be their birthright of incumbency with this money.
Ooh, man.
That's a great phrase.
Wow.
We're going to steal that and run with it. Bill, your 30-second rant starts right now.
It does go to the issue of responsibility. There are many people in this country who are disadvantaged, who are poor, who did not put themselves in that situation. I feel for those people, and I want to help those people. I genuinely do, for the sake of education. To the degree that those people spend their money on their kids, I'm fine with it. To the degree that they spend it on private stuff, I'm not so fine with it. And you talked about Soros having 20% and that money being controlled by the federal government, but if I own 20% of something, I got a say in how it's spent, so some ideology is coming along with it.
Thanks, Bill. I'll take the last word on this one. Say what you will about Soros, but at least he is putting his own money where his mouth is. Oh, that picture. And for a worthwhile goal, too, even if maybe it's not being quite achieved. Meanwhile, our president is happily turning himself into Matthew Lesko.
Does the economy have your budget down in the dumps? Maybe your budget just needs to be stimulated. Perhaps in the form of free money from the government.
Remember, you can read Scott Ott's family-friendly satire at scrappleface.com and in the Washington Examiner. Bill Whittle, of course, writes at Eject, 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 and appears most days right here at PJTV. For PJTV and Trifecta, I'm Steve Green.